Don Johnson became a superstar on Miami Vice, and now he's back on TV in and oil.
In the neon-lit glamour of the 1980s, no one epitomized cool quite like Don Johnson. With his pastel suits, designer stubble, and effortless swagger as Miami Vice's Sonny Crockett, Johnson wasn't just a TV star, he was a cultural icon, the very face of excess and style in Reagan-era America. But behind the wheel of his Ferrari and beneath the surface of the glitzy façade, a far less glamorous story was quietly brewing. Decades later, the same man who once defined success would face financial ruin so severe he nearly ended up homeless. Don Johnson is now 75. Look at him after losing all his money. We'll start from the very beginning. Peak fame in the 1980s. By the mid-1980s, Don Johnson had become one of the most recognizable faces in American pop culture, an emblem of television cool who transcended the small screen to redefine celebrity itself. His breakout role as Detective James "Sonny" Crockett on NBC's Miami Vice, which premiered in September 1984, catapulted him into global stardom almost overnight. The series quickly became a cultural phenomenon, drawing in over 15 million viewers weekly at its peak, and making Johnson a household name in over 80 countries where it was syndicated. The show's influence was so pronounced that Time magazine credited Miami Vice with reshaping the look and sound of television. Johnson's character was as iconic as the show itself. Suave, dangerous, emotionally complex, and always impeccably dressed. Crockett's signature look, complete with linen or silk pastel suits, t-shirts instead of dress shirts, and loafers worn without socks, became a fashion movement. Designers like Gianni Versace and Hugo Boss saw their clothing lines surge in popularity thanks to Johnson's on-screen aesthetic. Even men's fashion sales spiked, with Macy's and Bloomingdale's reporting double-digit growth in sales of light-colored suits and espadrilles by 1986. GQ magazine featured Johnson in multiple issues, and Esquire declared him America's most stylish man in 1987. But this was only one side of the story. Don Johnson's saga had many twists and turns, coming up much like his signature show. In any case, he was quite literally at the top of the world. By the end of Miami Vice's second season, he was earning around $30,000 per episode. But by season 4, his salary had soared to nearly $90,000 per episode. This is roughly equivalent to over $230,000 today. With a standard 22-episode season, that translated to nearly $2 million per year from television alone. Johnson also ventured into music, releasing 2 studio albums, Heartbeat in 1986 and Let It Roll in 1989. Though critically mixed, Heartbeat went gold, selling over 500,000 copies in the US, and the title track even peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. Johnson also collaborated with artists like Willie Nelson and Barbra Streisand, further expanding his appeal across entertainment genres. At the height of his popularity, Johnson was earning between $3 and $5 million annually. With wealth came extravagance. Johnson's real estate portfolio ballooned to include properties in Aspen, Los Angeles, and Miami. His Aspen estate alone sprawled over 17 acres and included a 7,400-square-foot main house, private ski access, and even a helipad. In Beverly Hills, he owned a lavish Mediterranean-style mansion nestled on Sunset Boulevard that became a legendary party hub for Hollywood's elite. At one point, Johnson owned over 25 luxury cars, including multiple Ferraris, Lamborghinis, a Bentley Continental, and even a rare Shelby Cobra. He spent over $1.8 million in car purchases alone. Between 1984 and 1989, his circle of friends was just as extravagant. Johnson was romantically linked to a string of high-profile women, including Melanie Griffith, whom he married twice, actress Patty D'Arbanville, and even Barbra Streisand. He hosted or attended private gatherings with Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, Mick Jagger, and Madonna. Tom Cruise was seen at multiple Johnson-hosted events in the late 80s, and a young Brad Pitt was rumored to have taken career advice from him. Johnson was even a regular at Studio 54 before its closure, and later at exclusive parties in the Hollywood Hills, where the likes of Sean Penn, Rob Lowe, and Prince would often gather. He wasn't just part of Hollywood's elite. He was a central figure in the social landscape of the era. Johnson's influence extended beyond entertainment. He was parodied on Saturday Night Live, name-dropped in dozens of rap and pop songs, and even featured in People magazine's Sexiest Man Alive issue in 1986. His impact on men's fashion and the TV anti-hero archetype paved the way for future stars, like George Clooney and Colin Farrell, who would later reprise the role of Crockett in the 2006 Miami Vice film. Johnson was even offered leading roles in films like Die Hard and The Untouchables, which eventually went to Bruce Willis and Kevin Costner, respectively. But while the spotlight shone brightly on Johnson in the 1980s, the foundation beneath his glamorous world was less stable than it appeared. Fame, money, and influence came quickly, and he lived as if the ride would never end. For a time, it seemed like it wouldn't, until, of course, it did. What came next would starkly contrast the glitter of his prime, as the man once known for pastel perfection found himself drowning in legal battles, debts, and the slow unraveling of an empire built on flash. But how did he even get to this point? Well, it was anything but easy. Humble beginnings. Donnie Wayne Johnson's story begins far from the glittering world of television fame in the modest, unincorporated community of Flat Creek, Missouri, where he was born on December 15, 1949. His parents were teenagers. His mother, Nell Johnson, was a beautician, while his father, Wayne Fred Johnson, was a farmer. The marriage was turbulent, and the young couple struggled to make ends meet in post-war rural Missouri. Seeking better opportunities, the family eventually relocated to Wichita, Kansas, where Johnson would spend the bulk of his formative years. But stability remained elusive. Johnson grew up in a working-class neighborhood riddled with economic challenges, and his home life was marked by emotional distance and dysfunction. By the time he was 16, the tension at home had become unbearable. In 1966, Johnson left his family home, supporting himself through odd jobs, including dishwashing and janitorial work. Ironically, Johnson's introduction to acting came by accident. At Wichita South High School, he enrolled in a drama class simply to fulfill a credit requirement. It turned out to be a defining moment. For the first time, he felt seen, heard, and understood. Cast as Tony in the school's production of West Side Story, Johnson not only discovered a natural flair for performance, but also experienced a deep emotional connection with the audience. The applause and attention gave him a sense of validation he'd never known at home. That moment under the spotlight became a pivotal turning point, inspiring him to take acting seriously. After graduating in 1967, Johnson attended the University of Kansas on a partial drama scholarship, majoring in theater. Though the university lacked the polish and prestige of more elite programs, it provided Johnson with foundational training and allowed him to deepen his understanding of stagecraft. But Johnson was hungry for more, and after just a year, he transferred to the American Conservatory Theater, or ACT, in San Francisco, a more prestigious institution known for its rigorous, performance-based curriculum. At ACT, he studied under influential mentors like William Ball and gained classical training that would sharpen his stage presence and vocal control. Johnson's time at ACT immersed him in the world of Shakespeare, Ibsen, and Tennessee Williams, and solidified his commitment to becoming a serious actor. In the early 1970s, Johnson began working in small theater productions and took whatever roles he could find in the burgeoning independent film scene. His screen debut came in 1970 with the forgettable The Magic Garden of Stanley Sweetheart, but the film marked his official entry into Hollywood. Johnson kept pushing, taking on small, often overlooked parts in television pilots and B-movies. His breakthrough, though still modest, came in 1975 when he starred in the post-apocalyptic cult classic A Boy and His Dog. The film, based on Harlan Ellison's novella, gained a dedicated following for its dark humor and offbeat tone, and Johnson's performance as the street-smart, morally ambiguous Vic was praised for its rawness and charisma. Though the film didn't bring him mainstream fame, it gave him a foothold in a competitive industry. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, Johnson remained a journeyman actor. He appeared in numerous made-for-TV movies, including The Rebels and The 2-5, and had minor parts in shows like Barnaby Jones and 8 is Enough. Behind the scenes, he was battling personal demons, including substance abuse and the lingering trauma of his childhood. But he also began forging key connections in Hollywood and working steadily. By the time the opportunity arrived, he was a hardened, hungry actor with more than a decade of struggle behind him. His rise to fame would be meteoric. Breakthrough with Miami Vice. Johnson's relentless grind throughout the 1970s, 10 years of forgotten pilots, paycheck-to-paycheck living, and hundreds of failed auditions was laying the foundation for a defining career turn. By 1984, when Miami Vice exploded onto screens, Don Johnson was a seasoned fighter who had spent over a decade proving he belonged. The NBC crime drama, developed by Anthony Yerkovich and shaped into a neon-drenched fever dream by executive producer Michael Mann, wasn't expected to be a mainstream hit initially. NBC executives had pitched it as MTV Cops, a show that would fuse the gritty edge of police procedurals with the stylistic flourish of music videos. What no one predicted was that Miami Vice would become a cultural juggernaut and redefine the landscape of 80s television. Premiering on September 16, 1984, Miami Vice debuted to modest ratings, but it rapidly grew into a pop culture phenomenon. By the end of its first season, it was averaging 15.6 million viewers weekly, and by its second season in 1985, it had surged to become the 9th most-watched show in America. Johnson's portrayal of Sonny Crockett, a brooding, stylish undercover detective who lived on a sailboat named St. Vitus's Dance and drove a sleek black Ferrari Daytona Spider, struck a chord with viewers who were tired of traditional cop shows. Crockett wasn't just tough, he was vulnerable, haunted, and effortlessly cool. Johnson's performance gave the character an emotional depth that elevated the show beyond its flashy aesthetics. Johnson's overnight transformation from struggling actor to global superstar was complete. His face adorned magazine covers from Time and People to GQ and TV Guide. In 1985 alone, Johnson won a Golden Globe for Best Performance by an Actor in a television series, Drama, beating out heavyweights like Tom Selleck and Edward Woodward. He was also nominated for an Emmy Award the same year. As mentioned earlier, his salary, which started at $30,000 per episode in the first season, ballooned to $90,000 by the fourth season and topped $100,000 by the final season, making him one of the highest-paid TV actors of the 1980s. Over the 5-season run from 1984 to 1989, Johnson earned well over $5 million in salary alone, not including residuals or endorsements. What truly set Miami Vice apart was its groundbreaking visual and musical style, and Johnson was at the center of it all. The pastel suits, t-shirts under blazers, sockless loafers, and Ray-Bans weren't just costumes, they became the decade's fashion blueprint. Designer Gianni Versace took note, as did Giorgio Armani, both of whom began sending Johnson free wardrobe items to showcase on the show. The series' costume department reportedly went through over 2,000 pieces of clothing in a single season. Johnson, who had once worn second-hand jackets and hand-me-down boots during his lean years, was now helping dictate global fashion trends. Crockett's look was copied by millions of men worldwide, from Wall Street brokers to high school seniors. The show's integration of contemporary music also revolutionized TV soundscapes. Johnson's scenes were often underscored by hits from Phil Collins, Tina Turner, Glenn Frey, and Peter Gabriel. musicians who also benefited from the exposure. The pilot episode alone featured Collins' In the Air Tonight, and its dramatic synchronization with Crockett and Tubbs driving through nighttime Miami became legendary. Miami Vice was one of the first TV shows to spend up to $10,000 per episode just on music licensing, and Johnson's love for music soon bled into his off-screen ventures. Riding high on fame, Johnson ventured into music himself and was met with impressive success. The perks of his newfound fame were enormous. Johnson purchased a lavish Mediterranean-style mansion on Star Island in Miami for $1.5 million. This was pretty extravagant for the time. His garage housed Ferraris, Porsches, and a Rolls-Royce. He traveled with an entourage and was known to spend thousands on tailored suits, watches, and fine wine. By 1986, Johnson had homes in Los Angeles, Aspen, and Key Biscayne. He even hosted parties attended by celebrities like Barbra Streisand, Jack Nicholson, Bruce Willis, Madonna, and Prince. His on and off relationship with Melanie Griffith returned to the spotlight, and in 1989, they remarried and had a daughter, Dakota Johnson, who would later become a successful actress herself. Despite the wealth and attention, Johnson remained deeply involved in the creative direction of Miami Vice. He clashed with directors over the show's tone and character development and demanded rewrites when he felt the material didn't meet the standard. His attention to detail and refusal to settle helped maintain the show's consistency during its prime. However, by the fifth season, both ratings and quality had declined. The show was ultimately canceled in 1989. But by then, Johnson had already etched his place in television history. However, he was not fated to ever return to the same level of fame and stardom. By 1990, Johnson's music career also wound down, but he continued to dabble in projects behind the scenes. He wrote a few unreleased tracks, considered a blues album in the mid-1990s, and even produced music for television pilots that never made it to air. In the early 1990s, Johnson transitioned into film with mixed results. He appeared in Harley-Davidson and The Marlboro Man in 1991, an action buddy movie co-starring Mickey Rourke. The film flopped critically and commercially, grossing just over $7 million against a $23 million budget. Still, Johnson's rugged charisma kept him in demand for tough guy roles. He also took on more dramatic parts, like in Paradise in 1991, alongside Melanie Griffith and Elijah Wood, which showed a softer side of his acting, though it flew under the radar commercially. His biggest success after Miami Vice came in 1996, when he returned to television with the CBS police procedural Nash Bridges. Johnson starred as the title character, a street-smart San Francisco detective. The series ran for 6 seasons until 2001 and was a ratings hit for CBS. Johnson had more creative control on Nash Bridges than he had on Miami Vice. He co-created the show and served as executive producer. Throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, Johnson also made appearances in lesser-known films like Goodbye Lover in 1998 and The Tin Cup in 1996, the latter of which paired him with Kevin Costner in a modest box office hit that grossed nearly $75 million worldwide. He even tried his hand at stage work, appearing in a London production of Guys and Dolls in the early 2000s. After Nash Bridges ended, Johnson hit a career lull. Roles became sporadic, and his once A-list presence in Hollywood diminished. Much of this time frame was overshadowed by personal and financial struggles. However, he made an unexpected resurgence in 2012 when Quentin Tarantino cast him in Django Unchained as plantation owner Spencer Big Daddy Bennett. Though it was a supporting role, the part was memorable and reminded audiences of Johnson's unique screen presence. He followed that up with a recurring role on the HBO series Eastbound and Down, and guest spots on shows like From Dusk Till Dawn, the series. More recently, Johnson was part of the critically acclaimed ensemble cast of Knives Out, directed by Rian Johnson. He played Richard Drysdale, a smug, upper-class patriarch with secrets to hide. The film was a box office smash, grossing over $310 million worldwide, and gave Johnson another taste of mainstream recognition. But through it all, there's another aspect of this whole story. lifestyle outside of acting. When he wasn't on set or in the recording studio, Johnson was a regular fixture at some of the most exclusive clubs and parties in Los Angeles, Miami, and New York. From Studio 54 to the China Club, from private Bel Air mansions to Miami Beach's neon-drenched nightlife, Johnson's name was synonymous with opulence, charisma, and a near-mythical ability to host and party with unrestrained abandon. Friends and industry insiders often joked that if you didn't see Don Johnson out at least 3 nights a week in 1986, you probably weren't looking hard enough. Johnson himself would later admit that he used the high-voltage energy of these environments as a way to escape the crushing pressures of stardom. In a 1996 Vanity Fair interview, he reflected candidly on how difficult it had been to deal with the overnight fame that Miami Vice brought. He said, "It wasn't just about having a drink at the end of the day. It was about silencing 1,000 voices in your head. When you're the face of a cultural phenomenon, it's easy to lose track of where the character ends and you begin." He poured much of his Miami Vice wealth into his lifestyle. He owned multiple properties, including a Mediterranean-style mansion in Aspen, a sprawling estate in Montecito, and a waterside property in Miami that had once belonged to Al Capone. Each property became the scene of elaborate parties, often spanning days, not hours, complete with celebrity guest lists that included Jack Nicholson, Sylvester Stallone, Robin Williams, Melanie Griffith, Bruce Willis, and Mick Jagger. Johnson was rarely seen without a drink in hand or a cigarette between his fingers during these years, and even his fashion reflected a kind of reckless elegance. Linen shirts half unbuttoned, bare ankles in expensive loafers, and Ray-Bans hiding bleary, sleep-deprived eyes. The nightclub scene played a huge part in shaping Johnson's off-set identity. In Los Angeles, he was often seen at Tramp and Carlos and Charlie's. In Miami, he frequented clubs like Fire and Ice and the Limelight. Bartenders and bouncers would recount how Johnson never waited in line, never paid a tab, and often arrived with a different entourage each night, sometimes aspiring actors, sometimes models, sometimes members of the Rolling Stones' extended circle. But the fun had a price. As he later recalled in an interview with Rolling Stone in 2002, the availability of controlled substances in those clubs was absolutely relentless. At a certain point, it became impossible to separate one's identity from the substance-fueled rituals of nightlife. Johnson's personal relationships suffered from the chaos. His on-again, off-again romance with Melanie Griffith, whom he married briefly in 1976 and then again in 1989, was famously turbulent. Griffith herself later admitted that their relationship was fueled by a mix of passion and dysfunction, with both struggling with substance abuse during their time together. "We were young and wild," Griffith recalled in her 2018 memoir. "Our life together was electric, but it was also explosive." Their second marriage, which produced their daughter Dakota Johnson in 1989, lasted only 7 years. The couple divorced in 1996, by which time Johnson had already begun distancing himself from the nightlife that had once defined him. The turning point came in the early 1990s when Johnson faced multiple interventions from friends, including Jack Nicholson and Barbra Streisand. According to insiders, Nicholson confronted Johnson one night in 1991 after a particularly destructive binge. "You're going to burn out faster than you rose," Nicholson told him. Around this time, Johnson quietly entered a rehabilitation facility in Arizona, where he began a process of self-reflection and healing. He later credited the experience with saving his life and helping him reconnect with the values he'd grown up with in Kansas: discipline, hard work, and humility. In 1994, he checked into the Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, California, seeking treatment for his alcohol addiction. This decision marked a significant turning point in his life. Johnson later admitted that he had lost control over his drinking and recognized that if he didn't make a change, he risked losing his family, career, and possibly his life. The path to recovery was not easy, but it was transformative. Johnson's commitment to sobriety allowed him to rebuild strained relationships, particularly with his children. He became a devoted father, cherishing the time spent with his family and embracing a more grounded lifestyle. His marriage to Kelly Fleeger, whom he met in the late 1990s, further solidified his new direction. Flieger, a schoolteacher, provided the stability and support that Johnson needed to maintain his sobriety and focus on his personal growth. Despite his efforts to change course, Johnson never entirely escaped the allure of high society. He continued to attend elite functions and industry parties throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, but with a noticeably more subdued presence. Instead of being the last to leave, he was now the one slipping out early, often with Dakota or one of his later children in tow. He also became active in philanthropy, donating to addiction recovery centers and speaking publicly about the dangers of fame without boundaries. But then another disaster struck. The 2002 financial document scandal. In November 2002, Don Johnson found himself at the center of an international financial controversy that would significantly impact his career and public image. While traveling from Switzerland to Germany, Johnson's car was subjected to a routine customs inspection at the German-Swiss border. Accompanied by his personal assistant and a Swiss financial advisor, Johnson was cooperative during the stop. However, customs officials discovered a briefcase containing financial documents, credit notes, securities, and other instruments, totaling approximately $8 billion. The sheer magnitude of the documents raised immediate suspicions of potential money laundering. German authorities detained Johnson for questioning, and the media quickly seized upon the story, speculating about his involvement in illicit financial activities. Johnson, however, maintained that the documents were related to a legitimate film financing deal and that he was unaware of any wrongdoing. After thorough investigations, German customs officials concluded that Johnson had committed no offense. They determined that the documents did not belong to him and that he was not involved in any criminal activity. The case was officially closed in May 2003, and Johnson was cleared of all suspicions. Despite his exoneration, the incident had lasting repercussions. The intense media scrutiny and public speculation tarnished Johnson's reputation, leading to lost opportunities in Hollywood. Around the same time, his acting offers were declining, and the glamorous image he had cultivated began to fade. Johnson continued his lavish lifestyle, maintaining multiple properties and indulging in luxury expenditures, which, coupled with costly obligations like alimony and child support, strained his finances. In 2003, City National Bank of Los Angeles filed a lawsuit against Johnson, claiming he owed nearly $1 million and $30,000 in legal fees. Unable to meet these financial obligations, Johnson filed for bankruptcy in July 2004 to protect his assets, including his Woody Creek Ranch in Colorado. Johnson's financial woes were further exacerbated by ill-advised business ventures and investments in areas he did not fully understand. As his income dwindled, debt accumulated, creating a classic case of a celebrity living beyond their means while facing financial collapse. However, Johnson managed to recover from his financial difficulties. In 2010, he filed a lawsuit against Reagan-era Entertainment, the production company behind Nash Bridges, claiming he was owed nearly $24 million in shared profits. A Los Angeles jury awarded him $23.2 million, and in 2013, Reagan settled the dispute outside of court, agreeing to pay Johnson $19 million. This settlement allowed Johnson to pay off his debts and regain financial stability. He returned to acting in the years that followed, appearing in various film and television projects. The Aspen Mansion crisis and how Don Johnson lives now. In the early 2000s, Don Johnson, the charismatic star of Miami Vice and Nash Bridges, faced a significant financial crisis that threatened his ownership of a cherished property, a sprawling 17-acre estate in Woody Creek, near Aspen, Colorado. This estate, which he had acquired in 1987 from Aspen socialite Terry Butler, symbolized his success and personal retreat from the limelight. However, by 2004, mounting debts and financial missteps placed this sanctuary in jeopardy. The financial strain stemmed from a combination of declining acting opportunities and unsuccessful business ventures. In an attempt to manage his debts, Johnson's company, Timber Doodle Glade Equity Venture, LLC, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in April 2004. This move aimed to protect the Woody Creek Ranch from being auctioned off to satisfy creditors, including a significant claim from City National Bank of Los Angeles for nearly $930,000. Despite these efforts, the financial pressures persisted. This culminated in a critical moment in 2006. Facing foreclosure, Johnson was given a deadline to settle his debts to D.A. Shaw Laminar Lending Incorporated, which had provided a $10.6 million loan in August 2004. The loan was crucial for Johnson's companies as they emerged from bankruptcy. By April 2006, the situation had become dire, with 14 acres of his estate scheduled for auction on the steps of the Pitkin County Courthouse if he failed to make the necessary payments. In a dramatic turn, Johnson managed to pay $14.5 million just in time, covering the delinquent debt, approximately $544,584 in interest, and $7,175 in attorney's fees, thereby averting the foreclosure. This financial ordeal marked a turning point in Johnson's life. Recognizing the need for stability, he focused on rebuilding his career and financial standing. As noted earlier, in 2010, Johnson filed a lawsuit against Reagan-era Entertainment, the production company behind Nash Bridges, and he used money from the settlement to pay off debts and regain stability. In the years following, Johnson returned to acting, taking on roles in films like Machete in 2010, Django Unchained in 2012, and Knives Out in 2019, as well as television appearances in series such as Eastbound and Down and Watchmen. Today, Johnson leads a more grounded lifestyle, focusing on his family and work, having navigated through one of the most challenging periods of his life with resilience and determination. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.